Some of your favorite American alcohols are no longer on the shelves here in Ontario. I know that for sure. I hear the complaints. Jim Beam has closed up shop south of the border because apparently Canadians drank all the bourbon that they needed to sell. And it's almost a confusing time in the world of alcohol sales and production here in Canada. The reason that I say that is because I really don't follow that industry all that closely. I don't drink. Most of my family, they dabble, but none of us are really connoisseurs of alcohol, save for tequila in my house on occasion. But that is an ethnic thing that we welcome in our home. So I reach out today for a better understanding of what's going on from Andre Proulx. He's a freelance writer. You'll find him in Toronto Life, and his podcast, Two Guys Talking Wine, positions him perfectly as the guy we need to talk to about what's happening on the liquor shelves and the wine shelves here in Canada. Hey, Andre.
Hey, Mike. How's it going?
Good. Thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it. You are the guy in the know. You make wine even.
Yes, I've got a little company, the ADX Wine Company. We make about 400 cases of high-end wine per year that you can find on the shelves of some fine restaurants from Toronto to Ottawa to Hamilton, but not on the shelves of the LCBO.
Making it even more exclusive and great reviews on it, by the way. Speaking of reviews, you're in the know, as I point out. You're writing about what's happening in the wine world on a regular basis, and your podcast covers it. Can you sort of unpack for me what's going on legally here in Canada on the liquor shelves?
I mean, where to even begin? Like the fact that we have the 13 different jurisdictions, I think that most people watching this would know is that alcohol sales vary widely from province to province. And, my family is from Saskatchewan. I live in Ontario on a visit back home, was shocked to see that things had changed quite a bit. It's quite recent that the Saskatchewan government had opened up their sales to private retailers. I was very excited to see a Wine and Beyond had opened. American products are back on the shelves of Saskatchewan stores. I'm very much in support of the Elbows Up movement, but I could not resist picking up a bottle of Weller bourbon, which is something that even when it did hit the shelves in Ontario would sell out virtually instantly. Apologies that my elbows aren't as high up as many other people would probably like them to be. But the thing that I was also very, very shocked about was the fact that I went into this individual shop, in the east end of Regina, and they had at least 20 different bottles of champagne available for New Year's, like proper champagne from France,
from the Champagne region,
sparkling bubbles. Yeah, not lumping in all the sparkling wines into one category. Where even if I set foot in the Oakville or the Summerhill location of the LCBO in Ontario, and as someone who is a connoisseur and a journalist, I do make the treks to the flagship stores in Ontario to look for the good stuff, for lack of a better term. Your selection is half what this little warehouse type store in the east end of Regina has. So, I'm fairly critical of the LCBO in general and how things are going. And, paying attention to the news right now, as I've said, I'm fully in support of what Canada is doing or what Ontario is doing in restricting U.S. alcohol sales, because it is one of the very few fronts in this trade war where we actually do hold a couple of cards in our hand. And it
seems to be, yeah.
And I mean, it is something where, in states like Kentucky and California, more so in Kentucky and Tennessee, where your lawmakers are likely to have the ear of the president, you have people willing to put pressure on the president to eliminate tariffs, move tariffs. Like, it's one of the few fronts of this trade war where we have an upper hand. California to a lesser extent, because I don't think Donald Trump is paying too much attention to what the Californian lawmakers are saying. He's made it
he's a little disconnected there.
You're with me or you're against me, and this is not partisanship in any way, shape, or form. It's just a statement of fact. But
now let me ask you, Andre. Sorry, let me ask you then. So this reduction of product on the shelves, it seems consumers are missing it. There is no doubt about it. If I did a little bit of reading online, is any of this going to change in the next little while here in Ontario? Is really the question.
I mean, we're starting to see cracks forming a little bit on the patience of the populace. Like Wob Canoe in Manitoba, recently announced stocking the American products that were in the warehouse and donating proceeds of that to charity, if I'm not
Oh,
mistaken,
wow.
which I do think is an interesting move, because we do have American products
Yeah.
sitting in warehouse, and as someone who owns a wine business, I don't sell my products out instantly. When a pallet of ADX rosé sitting in a warehouse, I have to pay my like 12 to 20 bucks a month storage fee. This has been
Mhm.
going on for most of the year, and think about the number of pallets that is. And I'm always critical of how the LCBO is run in terms of it not being an efficient operation. This is definitely not an efficient way to do business, even with a trade war going on. And there have been calls for Premier Ford to release the products, maybe do something similar to Manitoba, or just sell them out. On the other hand, though, as someone who writes about wine, went to Kentucky on his honeymoon, and loves American whiskey, as I said earlier in this, there are alternatives from other parts of the world. Like, if you're really jonesing for your California Cabernet Sauvignon, it might be a time to start discovering Australia or South America. And
Mhm.
frankly, you might save a few bucks if your go-to is ultra premium California. Like, I do think that this is where the elbows can and could be up.
Well, it's interesting because in other industries, other sectors, uh, most recently, I did an interview with Dan McTeague about oil, for example. It's time for Canadians to start to find other markets to sell to and other markets to buy from
Yep.
that are not so reliant on U.S. Customers. I hope that that happens. And so far, are you starting to see any other, um, I guess, manufacturers, distributors of wines, for example, starting to make headlines or headway here in Canada?
Um, Well, I know that it is the challenge, because making wine is climate specific. And like, this is something I've had to, as somebody who's covered the Ontario wine industry quite closely, that I still deal with on a regular basis. If people say we can't make good red wine in Ontario, and when someone says that to me, I ask what they typically drink, and they say California, Italy, South America. It's just like, the reality is we don't have the climate to make like big juicy red wines that people love
Right.
here. So if your go-to has been California, this might not be the place, the place to be, but places like BC and whatnot. So but we are seeing, much to my chagrin, like, we're seeing people in the Ontario wine industry trying to respond, trying to meet that demand, in the hopes that we might discover new customers, or customers might discover new products that they like. I remain skeptical, because during the pandemic in 2020, we did see an immense surge in local interest and an immense surge in local sales for the local wineries in Ontario. But the moment the restrictions were lifted, people went back to their old drinking habits. So, as much as we're going to weather the storm here, even if the tariffs are here forever, there's no way that this market is going to remain completely closed to the Americans indefinitely, especially with negotiations that are going to take place, at some
Mhm.
point. Like, there's no way this market's going to stay completely closed. But, we are seeing the ripple effects. I did see a news article published by a colleague I've traveled with yesterday, saying that ultra premium wineries in California are starting to look at readjusting their prices. And as a consumer, this is something I've been very excited about. The political landscape having a direct impact on that. Tourism from Canada to California down
Mhm.
25%, tourism from Europe down to California 15%. And this is all due to the current political climate. But, I've been saying for years that, there's a bit of a storm on the horizon for a region like California that doesn't have the pedigree of a region like France, with just, the quality of the product is very good, but it's hard to justify the prices of some of them. And outside of tariffs, and I know, like, that's what brought us together to have this conversation, is the Jim Beam story, when you and I did a bit of a pre-interview. Alcohol consumption has been going down over the past few years, and
That was my next question. It
and that's
seems
it.
like, we keep hearing, "Oh, it's bad for your health,"
It
for a
is.
long time. Of
Well, it
course
is.
it is. It's one of those things, for a long time, and you might recall this, we heard, the French live longer, healthier lives because they drink wine every day. We later found out that it had more to do with how they categorize morbidity in that country, as opposed to the wine having anything a saving grace in there. But yeah, we've seen maybe through the use of cannabis in the marketplace. I don't know if that's had an effect, but certainly people have a more health conscious approach to drinking.
I don't think it's just a health conscious approach. Like, there's so many facets to this story. And I've been finding it fascinating because in my past life, I was a news producer at CFRB in Toronto. And for the longest time, millennials were being blamed for everything that was going wrong in the media, everything that was going wrong with the housing
Right.
market, blah, blah, blah. Now people are blaming Gen Z, saying, oh, it's Gen Z's fault that wine sales are dropping. Gen Z aren't drinking them, and it's because of the healthy lifestyle, blah, blah, blah. But, I'm taking the pulse of my cohort.
Boomers can't mix it with their medications, you understand, Andre. So they're at them.
Well, I mean, boomers are still buying the ultra premium stuff. This is something I recently did a trip to Portugal. I'm a big fan of port. Fortified sweet wine. There's a good chance that your grandparents drank it.
Yep.
My grandparents certainly drank it, kept a bottle in the liquor cabinet, but like, it's really good stuff. And when I assembled my piece that I did, because I interviewed some winemakers there and visited some of the wineries in the city, which, just as a quick plug, if you're ever planning a vacation, the city of Porto is one of the most beautiful places on the planet. I was expecting doom and gloom when I was doing my research on sales stats, but I actually wasn't really surprised when I got the numbers back to me. It's the entry level category. If you're the owner of Yellowtail right now, if you're the owner of like Seven Deadly Sins or Josh, apart from the tariffs, if you're at the bottom of the market and you're mass producing what is basically plonk for the masses, this is where I'd be worried. Because when I pulled the sales stats on Porto, the entry-level market has completely collapsed and is in the process of collapsing further. But the ultra premium, the vintage ports, the 10-year, the 20-year tawnies, the stuff that hits the top shelf, the stuff that costs a little bit more, the category is actually increasing.
So it's more of a refined or exclusive brand that people are seeking out. They'd rather have the premium brands than just buy slop and become unwell in the process.
Not even necessarily that, but like, if your go-to was picking up a half dozen bottles of Yellowtail and having that be your typical wine to have around the house, that kind of culture is disappearing. And like, myself included, I don't drink on the weekdays. I save it for the weekend, and even then I preach moderation, because frankly, I would rather open a $50 bottle of Penfolds on a Saturday with a really nice cut of meat than open up an $8 bottle of Yellowtail on a Monday with whatever I'm throwing together quick in the kitchen for me and my toddler. And
you make it more of a destination moment in your week that has some special meaning to it. A better meal. It comes alongside a special moment just for you. It's not part of the daily grind, as it were, for people. And I'm noticing that as well.
Well, and we're even seeing that in France, like in a country where, culturally speaking, like you talked about the way they took a look at how these factors affected their health. The French consumption of wine is going down. When you're in France, they consider wine part of the meal. Like, wine is food there. That's not something that exists here because of our prohibition history. Wine is one of the evil, alcohol in general is one of the evil parts of society. And then, like, this is where it's all really nuanced. And I know I'm going a little bit all over the place, but like, when push comes to shove, alcohol is not good for you. But when you take a look at what's on your plate, there's a lot of stuff on your plate that isn't good for you. Salt, fat, carbs, calories, for that matter. If we want to go to a very basic level, it all comes down to moderation, right?
I think so. I think moderation is actually something that's hurting many industries. Fast food is another one out there that we're seeing a reduction in many ways. In the category of people that can afford other food, people are making healthier choices in that regard.
Well, and even better choices. Like, we take a look at like I said, I spent a lot of time focusing on my cohort, just because we were blamed for so many things for the longest time. But the concept of farm to table in my household is not like a buzzword. Like, it's a philosophy. I'm not someone who necessarily shops organic, but living in Hamilton and having access to a couple of great farmers markets and a couple of great retailers that focus on purchasing from farms direct from Ontario, you know, my elbows were always up in that matter. Like, I bought local because it feels good to support local farmers, and even if it costs a little bit more, like in the middle of the winter, if you can get your hands on a tomato that was grown hydroponically in a greenhouse in Grimsby versus a bunch of tomatoes that were shipped in from Mexico, and if all you can afford is Mexican tomatoes, I understand it.
Fantastic.
Make the choice. Like by all means, it's a wonderful world that we live in with globalization, that we can get whatever we want to eat whenever, at whatever time of year. But when you can taste that Ontario greenhouse tomato in January, February, it tastes better. And Monday to Sunday, like, this is not a weekend thing for me. I want my food to taste good Monday, like every day of the week.
Hey, Andre, you got me thinking here. Is there anything you think that the government could be doing provincially, maybe also federally, to help support more of a global market for winemakers like yourself that are sort of craft winemakers that have made it into the commercial side of things, the consumer side of things? Is there something more that could be done to promote within Ontario for winemakers, spirit makers, and even craft breweries? Is there something that we're leaving on the table?
Yeah, well, Mr. Carney said it from the onset. It's an election promise that he still hasn't come through with, and that's getting rid of interprovincial trade barriers. I've been fortunate enough with my little 400 case a year wine company to export. And yes, that's right. It's considered an export, like to another
When it
country.
goes to another province.
When it goes to another province, I've exported to Saskatchewan, BC, and Prince Edward Island. And what happens when my case of wine leaves my warehouse? It gets taxed by the LCBO. And when it enters the new province where it arrives, it gets taxed by their local liquor board as well. And, you know, I've said before, like, alcohol is not a healthy thing. Alcohol is a drug. It needs to be regulated. It needs to be taxed. It pays for our healthcare. I am not whining about the level of taxation that I'm paying, but it is hard to compete when something gets taxed twice while it's staying in the country. So, you know, maybe
not only that, but you're paying tax on so many things along the way in the process of actually manufacturing, even growing. I would imagine there's the purchase of grapes, everything is taxed along the way to have an additional tax within our own countries. That's a tough one to swallow.
Well, listen, my wholesale price on a bottle of rosé, and this is being completely transparent to everyone listening, is about $14.50, and that's with grapes, cost of bottle, and that includes a tiny bit for me and my three colleagues that run it. Like, it doesn't pay most of my bills, or frankly any of my bills. We keep the money in the company, but that's neither here nor there. We retail that bottle for $22. So that's where our
that's a fine margin
when we're doing locally. But when we sell it wholesale to, say, the BC Liquor Board, they mark it up. I believe it's between 80 and 100%. So when my bottle hits the shelf of the BC market, it becomes a $45 bottle of rosé. And, you know, if we really are trying to support the local industry, we need to find a better model for fair taxation for the local producers. Because frankly, it's cheaper to manufacture a bottle of wine in another country, even at a small scale, even at an ultra premium level, and it's just making it next to impossible to be able to compete.
What about export to the U.S. and to other markets? Are there? Certainly with the U.S. at the moment, we have tension and issues there. But generally speaking, when you're exporting to other countries, are there challenges that we could overcome here at home?
It all comes down to taxation, right? Like the fact that the alcohol laws still are prohibition era laws. We're dealing with 100-year-old laws. We're dealing with 100-year-old levels of taxation. It does make it a challenge. I know we have seen a lot of Ontario wineries have quite a bit of success exporting to countries in Europe. I know the UK has been developed as a very good market. And that's one of those things where it's a dollar and cents issue. It's like, even with the level of taxes, thanks to the exchange and just the cost of living in the UK, you know, a great bottle of Ontario wine becoming 35, 40, 50 pounds a bottle is in line with what else you can get in that market. So it's incredibly challenging to be competitive in foreign markets. And when I'm saying foreign, I'm also including other provinces, just because of the amount of taxes that end up on that bottle.
I saw an event taking place. It was a couple of years ago now at Canada-U.S. in London,
Yeah.
and the event was showcasing wines and spirits from across Canada, and there were some great reviews. I recall that more than anything. But the one thing that I did note was that price competitiveness was almost the headline from everybody who wrote or responded to this, and that was because the whole focus was these are great products, these are great wines and spirits, but to get them into this country at a competitive price, and up against this other brand from France and this other brand from Germany, and it just seemed like an impossible market to meet.
I mean, I can't add anything to that beyond the fact that like the producers are jumping up and down trying very hard to shine the spotlight on it. But the other thing to keep in mind too is I think a lot of people think about alcohol, and like this is also the global shift with how people are drinking, is like once upon a time, your liquor cabinet had just products from large distillers, and I don't want to name any to throw them under the bus, but you're
No,
dealing with
but you're right.
large corporations that provide union jobs and make a lot of money for their shareholders. But like when you're talking about craft wine and even craft spirits to a certain extent, like my company is four guys. Like that's it. We're four guys who run the business, and then whoever we contract our work out to, whether they bottle for us or sell us, our suppliers. Like these are small businesses. They're mom and pop shops. They're four scrappy guys from Ontario just trying to make their dream of making wine come true. We're not a unique story.
How do you guys do that? You got two of you loading the grapes into the vat and two of you stomping the grapes. Is that you switch it up?
Fortunately, Mike, there are machines that we're able to rent that take care of more of the dirty work for us. But the structure of the company is two of our partners are competent winemakers, and the other two of us take care of the selling of it. It's it's a nice arrangement.
But I can see that if we want craft product out there in the market, we do need to take care of our own. I can see that. That's where I think elbows up becomes most important, when it's four guys trying to make great product that you couldn't get anywhere else in the world. By the way, if you don't mind sharing with us, what's the wine? What's the name?
The name of the company is the 80X Wine Company. 80xwine.ca is our website. We called it 80X because all the business partners are born in the 1980s, and the year we founded the company. Yeah, the year we founded the company, the New York Post was blaming millennials for the demise of the wine industry, much like people are doing now. So we decided to take ownership of it, and pretty much exactly like I predicted when we founded the company. Our generation is drinking less, but we're drinking better. So,
I know what I want
to. Company is producing as high a quality wine as we can, as economically as possible.
This leads me to another question I've been dying to ask you for some time, even just away from the show. Mark Wahlberg's got his own tequila now, Azul, Casa Azul. You've got George Clooney with his. By the way, stop mixing me up with George Clooney, people. He's got his own tequila, I believe. What's that? Anyway, I think a bunch of comedians have their own. Sports players. There's
everybody's got their name on a bottle these days.
So how do you feel about that? And what's the product like by and large? Is there any sort of like, oh, if it's got somebody famous on the bottle, you're gonna want to take a pass, or is this pretty good product?
I mean, it's pure marketing, and you have to hedge your bets on who the target market is and what the product is, and it is a minefield, right? Like for example, like the wine brand 19 Crimes. They did a partnership with Snoop Dogg and with Martha Stewart. The Martha Stewart Chardonnay is, if you really like oaky Chardonnay, not terrible and not too expensive. And as someone who loves to cook and spend time in the kitchen, Martha Stewart is my favorite felon. I'm a big fan of hers. A big fan of
she's
her.
She's a cool felon, yeah.
I also just think it's cool how she's just kind of taking ownership of like what's going on. But the same company came up with a Snoop Dogg Red that was like loaded with sugar, crazy high in alcohol, and it's one of those things too where as a child of the 90s, it's just like, how hard is it to if you own a gin company, do a gin and juice collab with Snoop Dogg and print money as opposed to slapping his face on a wine bottle. But on the
That's a
other side
great
of the
point.
on the other side of the coin, there's a small winery in New Zealand called In Vivo, and they did a partnership with Sarah Jessica Parker. I enjoyed Sex in the City. I'm not like the core demographic of that, but she's an actress. She's actively involved in the assemblage, the final blending of that wine. And I remember getting the sample sent to me, sipping it in my backyard during the summer, making some notes, being like, holy crap, is this good? This has way more business, or this has no business being as good as it is with a celebrity name attached on it.
Yeah, it always makes me suspect, to be honest with you. But I have heard that George Clooney's, what's George Clooney's tequila again?
I got to look that up. I don't know.
It'll come to me while we're doing this. But I've heard that and the mezcal, both very good.
Casamigos.
Casamigos, that's it. Yeah.
Oh, Casamigos is very good stuff. Top shelf tequila. I think a little overpriced for what it is, but I mean that's the other thing I keep in mind with when I'm shopping brands, and I think this is just the inherent millennial snob in me. Is if I'm overpaying for something to pay for the marketing, I tend to take a pass and try to find a smaller producer that's doing something on a comparable level.
That's a big change, I think, also, as you point out, the ability to search out, understand, do the research now, get ChatGPT to give you a pairing suggestion and make you more informed, I think, is also an opportunity of your generation, now every generation.
But not too much ChatGPT. Make sure you follow me at Andre Wine Review on social media platforms, because you'll get personalized recommendations, and I offer dialogue that ChatGPT cannot.
I will promise you that's true. Having known Andre for many years, the dialogue is brilliant.
I just want you telling people to go to the computer to replace the function of us wine writers here. Because
I don't want to do that. No, I understand. And the research, it takes many hours, and it's very enjoyable for you. But I will say this, Andre, of all the people I've talked to about wine, you're really super knowledgeable and unsnobby entirely. Even the fact that you make your own wine, which gets great reviews, it doesn't seem to rattle you into becoming a different guy about wine and alcohol. You really are looking out for the average drinker who wants to get some good quality product. Once again, Toronto Life is where you'll find them. Two Guys Talking Wine is the podcast. I would assume that's available everywhere podcasts are.
Everywhere podcasts are available. Canada's second longest running podcast online.
I've heard it's the longest running one, but it's a technicality there. That's my opinion. Listen, Andre, I really appreciate this, and I hope you join us again as we head to spring and we start to have a look at the horizon of what will come out of the next growing season here in Ontario. I wish you and your partners great success with your wine.
Thanks, Mike.